Today's lecture is called Wireframe Presentations and Team Formation. And this is basically, we're going to do the first half of the class. Everyone's going to present their wireframes. I've created a random order for you all to go in. And then after that, we're going to really, this is sort of a transition. We go from talking about fundamental principles, more concepts about digital health, to actually the nuts and bolts of how you create a website. So this is probably my favorite inflection point in the class, because this is where you kind of turn from learners into builders. So I'm excited to move forward. Going on to the next slide, I've created a Google form that I would like you all to use. Let me just copy this and put it in the chat. Okay, so you should have the link to that form in the chat. Go ahead and click that. The one thing that I want you all to remember is that the first name that you put into the form is your name. The second one, it's like a drop down, and that's the person who's presenting. So you'll obviously have your name the same every time, but make sure you get those right. Otherwise, it'll be confused in all the ratings. So please fill one out for everyone. You're going to be rating the presentation as well as the wireframe itself. And then the last part, which doesn't really feed into the grade at all, is how willing you would be to work on that team. And so I'll use those ratings as a gauge to figure out which projects to move forward with the prototypes. But for your actual grade on the presentation, it's really more on the first two, mostly on the wireframe itself, and then a little bit about how you present it. So remember, present the user story, like really put me in the shoes of that user, so that instead of saying, hey, we got this button that does that, always ask yourself and then tell us, how does this button impact the user story? So tell me that story of how the user interacts with the app that you've created, or the internet site that you've created using your wireframe, and how that makes them happy. Okay. Try to keep it under 10 minutes, more or less. In addition to the user stories, make sure that you go over at least 5 different functions: buttons, links, data inputs, visuals, etc. And then there should already be annotations with arrows to each function, that sort of thing. And then try as much as possible to describe at least one use case from beginning to end, so that we can see how the user comes in with needs and potentially inputs, and then they come out with those needs having been at least partially fulfilled. Okay, any questions? All right, let's get started then. Let me just admit Joanne. Okay, so the lucky first person up is Tristan. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then you can share yours. And then as soon as you're ready, just get started.
Hi, everybody. So this is my idea. It's called the Disease-A-Base. And what it really is a one-stop shop for anything related to diseases, drugs and medication for those diseases, the associated molecules. And it's kind of a Wikipedia specifically for this area. So the user story that I focused on was, for example, a research associate at a biotech firm. She needs information, and whether it be specific drug to cell interactions, discovering new molecules, or just generally expanding her knowledge about the area, she can come to Disease-A-Base, and she can see that at the top, there's diseases, drugs and medication, molecules, and depending on which one she clicks, she can go over here and see a drop-down menu of an A through Z list if she already knows what she's looking for. This gives her quick to an alphabetical list of all the associated diseases, as well as like a popular page with the currently most searched diseases. And so if she doesn't know what she wants and she just wants to browse all the diseases, she can click this button, which will then link her to a new page, which is it's a similar format with the same most commonly searched diseases, as well as the A through Z, and an advanced search button where she can type in keywords and associated things. But once you click one of the letters, then a alphabetical list of diseases will drop down, and there she can search through what she needs, and there will be little plus buttons on the side of each of them with extra links that will be sourced from articles, PubMed, anything you can find associated to this will be linked to it. And this will actually take her to a different website. And therefore, that way she can go and find whatever she needs and then come back to another link. And then what she can also do is do the same thing for the associated drugs and medications. And so it's very similar. It'll have an alternate tab for drugs and conditions, which will also take her to this page, which can show her the latest news if she's interested in that, a similar function in alphabetical list. And this will all take her to outside sources. And it's kind of a one-stop shop area for you to browse information from all across the internet in one place. The major functions that I really have are the drop-down menus, as you can see, with the alternate tabs, as well as this on our contact page, where if you're browsing via mobile, you can click the button and it would automatically call with the user's phone. And similarly with the mail button, it would open up the user's mail browser and start drafting an email with that specific email address. This can also, it doesn't have to be used for a medical professional. This can also be used for somebody who just generally wants to expand their knowledge. And the reason why I thought this was a good idea is because the information is readily available and it's at your disposal in 2 to 3 clicks. Where if I wanted to search about coronavirus, I can click diseases, click C, and I would be given the list, and I would have all these links at my disposal to go search, as well as if I wanted to look up drugs and medications, whether there has been any advancements in that, I can do the same thing, browse drugs or conditions. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Tristan?
I had some questions. I think it seems like a really cool idea, just putting it all into like one specific stage, almost like a Wikipedia for it. How often do you think this could be like updated, and would there be a way of automating some of that?
The idea I had with that was it might be a little complicated, but it would be to write an algorithm or train some sort of AI to browse the web according to specific keywords and pull that information, pull those links, and continuously update that, whether it be, every day, every week, to keep it up to date. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Hi, Tristan. This is Maria speaking. I have a question. How does Diseasabase differentiate between like the other platforms that are currently out there? Like, for example, there's like you can just go in like to PubMed, right? But like, what differentiates your website compared to the others?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Like, what differentiates your database website to the other ones that are already out there? Like, is it in terms, would you say that it's more layman terms, like for the normal person to research?
I think, yeah, I think a big thing is that it's definitely easier to navigate for the average user, where meanwhile you can also use it as an expert. Compared to what I've seen, they have one of the parts. So I've found some with just the disease area, just the drugs and medications area, or one simple molecule. Like for the molecule area, when I did my research, I found some that had just a pure Wikipedia text-based place where you click A through Z or type in your bonds, and then it'll show you the structure. Whereas here I can have the normal Wikipedia, I can have you draw a structure that will then relay you to a 3D modeler, which you can look at for yourself. You can look at periodic table. So to answer your question, I think what differentiates this from the other ones is that it's a little culmination of a little bit from here, a little bit from there. And that way they kind of interlink with each other, so that if you look up coronavirus, then you find information on that. Then you look at the medications for it, and then you can look at the molecules. You can do that all through Diseasabase.
I see. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It looks like this is more of an aggregator, right? Which some aggregators can be very successful platforms where you're not necessarily creating the content yourself, but you're figuring out ways to put all of that content into one place. And I think that's a great strategy. And I think what you would want to concentrate on is, what are you going for? Are you going for more ease of use or quantity of information, or design? Maybe it's a cool design. Did you have any thoughts as to what might be sort of the thing that you focus on in terms of like design, content, ease of use?
I mean, why not all three, right? But
sometimes it's tough though, it's like Apple has gone pure design, and then someone like Amazon has actually said, we're all about the cheapest, most efficient way to get something done. And so, just their site has barely changed in design over the years, and it's not really that great looking. So did you have a thought as to what might be the most interesting or the most valuable route to go to satisfy like what you felt the mission was in terms of this platform?
I would have to say ease of use.
Right. So if we pursue this as a prototype, I'd encourage you to look at with each feature, how can you, I know at the beginning you mentioned the number of clicks to get some information. So how can you make that number of clicks as low as possible at all times? And then also somehow, and this is always the tension, self-explanatory, so that people know when they see a button what to do with that without having to read a whole paragraph to figure that out. Great, thanks so much, Tristan.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is Michael Gonzalez.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So for the user story, I have someone as an example, let's say, who was just diagnosed with ADHD, since that is a lifelong condition to where it is often not diagnosed until adulthood in some cases. And this person wants to learn more about the process of living with ADHD and just with like better tips on like how to manage it, and just different stories of how like from other patients with ADHD. And so that's where this comes in. And then for the functions I have listed here, I have well, for this MedPen Pals, I have joining. The whole idea of this is to join, like it's kind of like a Facebook in a way. There are some like that, but like joining different communities based on different medical conditions people have. But also on top of that, it's just the fact of presenting like official like research studies and papers on it, and like scientific information in a way that just normal lay people can easily understand. So the combination of those two, just and also being easy to use, could also could be for the MedPen Pals website. Kind of the goal for that. And then here I have link. Here are the just different information to set, like sign up, and then different profiles, and then for just people are able to customize a profile there. And then this is like the show the more social aspect of it, just different groups, pages, and different posts people can do, just sharing different problems they might have or different conditions, how it is to live with it. And then here it is like being able to make a post, and then resetting password and all that. But there's also the aspect, I forgot to mention this earlier, of finding specialists and doctors in your area, depending on your condition. So it has like, what's your insurance provider, what area are you in, what type of care are you looking for, different information like that. So it has also ideally have that function in it as well. And yeah, so just the three aspects are the social, kind of like Facebook style portion of it, and then also the presenting information, and then finding medical care, like all within the one, I guess. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Michael? Let's start it off. So you've got, I guess, a few different aspects to it. You have the social aspect, as well as the finding a physician. And I found it interesting that you combine those two functions. What led you to want to do that? And do you see any potential efficiencies by having both of those functions side by side?
Just with I saw that there were already kind of existing like websites for the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that after reading through some of the posts and some of the examples, that people could, let's say, realize that they're, like, let's say, if, like, people talk about like different medications, how they would work, and let's say how certain parts of their condition could affect other parts of their body. And just that like amount of learning could lead them to, okay, maybe seek out maybe a specialist, or like talk to a doctor more about different options. And just maybe having that built into the website already could possibly make that easier in a way. But yeah, that's kind of one aspect of it.
Would it be possible to almost have like a filter feature or like a search bar that you can be able to have anyone who commented on like the use of maybe I didn't see it, of like yoga in any of their kind of like conditions, and maybe they could read about different blogs of individuals who had had success with it?
That could actually be a good idea. I don't think I thought of that one.
That would just be a way of kind of filtering through all the different blog posts that you would get. Because if you're getting thousands of blogs,
True.
it might be hard to.
I think the idea of it was to mainly have it filter to what conditions you sign up for.
Mm.
But I think that's the only one I had in mind. But maybe having it like in terms of other aspects could be pretty useful too.
By like intervention, you could potentially do like alternative medicines too. That's interesting.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Pretty good.
Anyone else? I do think it's interesting to have the whole finding care and the social aspect of sort of patients talking with each other, learning from each other side by side. I do think that's unique, and there's a lot of things you could potentially do with that. So I definitely encourage you, if this ends up being pursued as a prototype, to think of what those things might be. You know, as an example, I'm not pushing this at all, but, and this is just off the top of my head, as you mentioned it. So we have the Find a Doctor, and then you also have these patients who have built a level of trust with each other. So you might be able to combine that Find a Doctor with referrals or something like that, like Nextdoor. I don't know if you all use that, but that works in a similar way, where it's like, I'm mainly using it to interact with my neighbors, but also now if I'm looking to find a roofer, right, or a handyman, I can actually ask my neighbors who they recommend. So that there might be overlap there. So I think it's definitely, you took two ideas that are probably the least unique things in digital healthcare, right? There's the Find a Doctor and the social network, but then in combining them, it becomes something more unique. So I think that's definitely something worth pursuing, and is a good example of how, you know, sometimes innovation is just combining two unoriginal ideas in an original way. Okay, thanks so much, Michael. Okay, next up is Alana.
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have two user stories here. So the first one, I said, as a patient, I want the ability to travel to my medical appointments or for any medical needs at a low cost so that I can gain the best possible access to healthcare. And my second user statement is, as someone who wants to make a difference in healthcare, I would like to create a patient transportation service that is covered by insurance in order to decrease barriers to healthcare access so patients can receive the best treatment possible. So overall, I wanted to create some sort of patient transport system that could be covered by insurance to basically mitigate the high costs associated with patients having to travel to their different medical visits, hospital sites, clinical trial sites, and whatnot. So I will walk you through my app that I created. So I created an app called Dispatch. And so after you click the app, it first takes you to this screen. So you'd first just put in some information about yourself, your name, date of birth, everything like that. And then you would press this button to move forward. And then you would input your location. And from there, you would input your insurance information. So that way, your insurance information is automatically in the system, and it can be, and your rides can be covered. And ideally, this system would also match you with different hospital sites and different physicians in the area that also take your insurance plan. So you know that when you arrive to a hospital site or something, that you are being covered. And so for these two, I have drop-down menus. So you would just click this, and then these are the options that would show up for the type of insurance. And then for relation to insured, these are the two options. And then from there, I wanted a feature for accommodations. So I said, do you require any accommodations? Either yes or no, that would also be a drop-down. So if the answer is no, then it would take you to the completed screen. But if the answer is yes, that will then take you to a list of questions. So accommodations for transport, different assistive devices, service animals, if you require someone to not speak English, if you don't want your driver to speak English, or any other accommodations. Another one I wanted to include here was to ask about certifications if you wanted your driver to have a specific level of certification or something like that. So then from there, based on your answers to these questions, then I kind of just went through the same process of, if your answer is yes, what kind of assistive device did you have? And then just the drop-down menu, then specify from there. And I kind of just walked through the same thought process for each of the other options. So that was that. And then after you click submit, that'll take you to the completed screen. And then from there, it would take you here. So this right here is, I said this is the home screen. So it would have your location, and it would also have the search bar here. And so when you click on the search bar, it will then take you to these two options. So you can search either by a medical site or a healthcare professional. And based on that, either different sites will pop up in your area and the drivers will also pop up near you, or different medical professionals will also pop up. And then you can also request a ride either by a medical site or a healthcare professional. So I kind of walked through a very similar process for both. So let's just say you typed in for a medical site. This would show up. So the most recent search options would show up here, because a lot of people have to continuously go to the same site or hospital. So that mitigates having to go back and search for the site you want to go to. And then I also have a filter option, so you can filter by the site, the type of site you want to go to. And then from there, you can just choose a site that you want, and then it pops up the information about that specific site. So you know if they're open, or if you want to look at their website beforehand, or if you want to call them beforehand, you can do that. I also wanted to include a picture of like the location, so you know where it is. And then from there, if you click go to this location, different options of different cars can show up. And so, and then you can also see where the driver is in relation to you and how long that would take. So from there, you would just choose whichever option you want. And then this page will pop up. So it'll tell you what kind of car you requested, the time of drop off. And then if you want to confirm the ride, you can, or you can also click here to go and look at the driver information. So from here, it'll ideally have a picture of the driver, the driver's rating from other passengers, the make and model of the car, any certifications or the languages that they speak. And then I kind of just walk through the same sort of thought process with healthcare professionals as well. So so in this filter setting, this would be by specialty in this case. And then more or less, that's pretty much the same sort of thought process. You would have a picture of the healthcare professional there. So that was that. I just wanted to make it as easy to use as possible, and easy to filter what you're looking for. And then as well as having the ability to actually type in something here, I also wanted the ability for the user to just click on whatever site or click on whatever healthcare professional is in their area, if they just want to search whatever's in the area rather than looking for a specific place. So if you were to click on any of these sites, let's just say this one, the information about the site would pop up. And then from there, if you're going to, let's say, a hospital or something with a lot of physicians there, the available physicians that take your insurance would also populate. So then if you clicked on this button, all the available physicians would show up, and then you can click on any physician you wanted. This also has a filter option, very similar to the other one. You could filter by specialty in this case. And then this would pop up about the physician, and then you can go back to the location, or you can click visit this healthcare professional. I did the same walkthrough here, basically just to show that rather than having to go back and click the back button every time you want to switch between looking for a healthcare professional or a site, it's kind of easy in that you could search for a healthcare professional, but it'll also link you to the site if you want to go that way, if you want to go specifically to a site, or if you want to go to a different healthcare professional. So that was kind of my thought process there. And then I also have just the main menu. When you click the main menu button here, these are the different options that will show up. And then these are just the different possibilities. So ride history, if you want to look back on your ride history, your insurance, if you want to change up your insurance, you can click the edit button and do that. All your accommodations will show up, and then settings as well. So I think, again, I just wanted to make this as easy to use as possible. And I think some of the main functions I have in this are like drop-down menus, filters, maps, different links and buttons to different areas. Yeah, I think that's it.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Great walkthrough, Alana. I think it really has a big need, and I think it also sounds like a really great, well thought out idea. A little question is just about kind of security right off the bat when kind of thinking about insurance and putting all your kind of insurance and date of birth. And I know that it's kind of featured on a lot of other apps, and a lot of other apps do it, but have you thought anything about security and security breaches?
I did not actually. That's a good thing to think about. I didn't really think about that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the one thing I did think about is like, if this were to happen, I guess the app would have to partner with different insurance companies in order to make this work. But I'm not quite sure how the security would look in this, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I know a lot of other insurance companies have done apps, and that's all pretty much secure. And then just one other little question about kind of the cars and the apps that you would be kind of having. How would you be having the drivers? How would they be getting paid? And would individuals have to be paying for these services?
So I was more so thinking that the company would be paying them for that. I mean, the patients would, again, this would be covered by the insurance company. So I was more so thinking like, this company would partner with insurance companies. And yeah, I don't know. I didn't really think about that fully, honestly.
When in doubt, the insurance company will pay.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Good.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think in terms of security, that's not something you need to worry about for this, but it might be worthwhile, especially if during your user testing, more of the users are also expressing that privacy concern, to have some sort of language up front that assures them that they're okay, sharing that information. Sometimes that can make a huge difference as to whether someone will actually go ahead and input the information. And it's how good do they feel about the site that they're looking at. And then one question that I have is, and this could go either way, there's no right or wrong answer, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and why, is will someone be booking the appointment and ride right away? So is it like, I want to go to the doctor this afternoon, so I book it and then they send me a car? Or am I booking days or even weeks or months in advance, and then they just make sure that my ride is taken care of?
I was more so thinking that this would kind of be like a one-stop shop. You could just do it both in one setting. But at the same time, I did kind of want to create some sort of option where you could just have the option of writing somewhere and not necessarily creating an appointment at the same time. But again, I kind of just wanted this to be more so of a one-stop shop. So it would be like a 2-in-1.
Gotcha. So you'd probably book in advance, and then this would send you your car. And then, if you take that approach, it would be interesting to see, okay, well, what else might they want to know? Do they want reminders leading up to that appointment date? Things like that, I think could be really helpful. Another thing to think about is this designed as more of a concierge kind of higher end service, or is it more to address sort of the underserved communities that have a difficult time getting to their appointments?
Yeah, I was more so thinking that this would be for the undeserved communities. I wanted this to be as accessible and easy to use as possible. Yeah, so I wasn't necessarily gearing this towards like a luxury service necessarily.
Well, that's great. And I think that transportation really is one of the biggest barriers, and definitely the most underrated barrier to healthcare. I think a lot of people skip out on their appointments, as well as just don't take advantage of opportunities that are available, because the idea of taking off from work or paying the bus fare 2 hours just to get to where they needed to go to get their healthcare, it's too daunting for, it's a vast majority of people in a lot of these underserved communities. So having that knowledge that they're going to be able to get from point A to point B, it's not going to be out of pocket. I think that's not only something that would be tremendously valuable for the community, but also something that I think payers would be willing to pay for, or at least the government would be willing to subsidize. And so just thinking about how do you gear the app towards that demographic, right? I think language will be a big thing if you're going for that demographic. So how do you build that into your feature list? Just as one example.
Got it.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. All right, next up is Angelo.
All right. Hold on. All right. You guys can see my screens, all right?
Yes.
All right, cool. So my application is a platform for podcasts that's meant for medical professionals. I know it says podcast or physicians right now, but it's kind of like more intended for any medical professionals. So the user story that I kind of want to focus on is that, as you can see here on the left side of the screen, is as a physician, I want to be able to listen to specialized medical podcasts so I can keep up to date with the most recent discoveries, technologies, issues, and news in the medical world. So with that in mind, I kind of came up with this Wireframe, this app that is designed to like help healthcare workers, keep up to date with all like the latest technologies, discoveries. So in this one, so this is the homepage. So basically, the title will be up here when an application, like the picture and the logo probably goes here. I haven't thought of a title yet, maybe like Medcast or Doccast. I'm not that creative, so that's something I could, think of later. So if someone wants to learn more about my platform, they could either click learn more here and it'll bring you to a help page, which I will actually go over later on. Or they could, and they're really interested already, they can click the get started and it'll lead them to create an account page. On the bottom of the homepage, it will like show a bunch of user stories of like doctors that probably already used it, maybe later on when we get reviews on the application of like how they like the app or whatever. So first things first, like I do have 5 main pages for this app. This is the home page. And then the second one would be the following page. And on this following page, one app or one feature that the application would have is that if a user tends to like a certain series or a certain like podcast series, or episodes or users, they can follow that user. And on that, so when they follow that user, they can, they will see either their series or like the podcast that they have here, like so this yeah, like you can see the different podcasts here, but like, so like the podcast title, the username, and like the description of their podcast, like what it's about. And if any of these videos are clicked, it will actually lead to the podcast episode page. So the podcast episode page will look like this. It will be like the podcast title on the top, username, and their podcast with like, if it has a video included with it, we'll have a video. If it's just if it's just audio, then there would be no video here, just be an audio clip. And it's kind of like a similar platform to, or it has a similar like visual look to, I guess like a video platforms like YouTube. So there'll be like related podcasts to the specific podcast. So like will show up here, and there will be also a comment page where people can comment like what they think about the series. And with that, there's also like my next main page was a browse page where people can like search up the different categories that they really want to focus on. So let's say like one of the categories will show up here, the second category will be here. Like the categories can be like either technologies or medicines or discoveries, like the most recent discoveries, and they'll be listed here. The user, there will also be a search bar up here if they have a specific category in mind, and they can also filter here with like through the most recent, the most viewed, the most likes, or alphabetical. But yeah, this is just the main idea of like being able to look for the podcast you want. And the next page that I have will be the help page. And on this one, it will be a page full of like different buttons. So it include like the basics and tutorials. So that would be like how to upload podcasts, how to search for podcasts, how to comment on podcasts, or any other feature of the sort. There will be frequently asked questions, like just a list of the FAQs. Will be a report an issue where people can submit a ticket. How to contact us page as well, which it will lead to like a list of the help email, phone number, contact information, or other necessary stuff. There will be also a button that says search for articles, which is intended to have a full list of helpful tutorials, not just the basics from the first one. And lastly, there maybe in the future, I can include like help forums where users can, it's basically a forum where users can ask each other for like help regarding like potential issues. And then lastly, like the last main page that I have on my app is the account page. In here, it will just be like the bunch of different settings that the user can have in terms of their account, which will show their full name, their username, the password, profile picture, phone number, email address. And then there will be privacy settings. You can maybe show your full name on the comments or username only, anonymous. Like, can keep your follows as private. You could keep your email address, phone number as private. Like you can control whatever you want to keep as private. And then there'll be the notifications. This is an app. You can control how often you see notifications on your phone. You can turn on and off, like maybe you can control which notifications you want to receive, maybe control the email notifications you get as well, and text alerts, and anything else regarding that. And lastly, like there's the advanced settings that includes probably like an option to delete your account if you don't want to use it anymore, or like any security authentication issues, or any other like settings that I haven't really thought of. And yeah, that's about it. Like this is my app. It's just a podcast platform for medical workers.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Angelo?
I had a question.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
So would this be more similar to YouTube, where users would sign up and then upload things themselves, or would these podcasts be sourced from somewhere else?
Yeah, so definitely this is kind of like a YouTube where people have to make their own account and share their own podcast. And so I kind of intended it to be like a platform that's mainly specific to the different podcasts in the medical world. So you know how YouTube is like very broad, doesn't really have like a specific idea in mind, could be like whatever videos people upload, but this one is more specific to just podcast in the medical world. So that's kind of like my differentiation for it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, I really like the concept. I think that there's a tremendous need for something like this. And I would really be one of the users as someone who listens to a lot of podcasts, but has no interest in listening to people talk for an hour about true crime or politics. Sometimes it's difficult for me to find the right podcasts for me. And so a better way to find healthcare related podcasts, I think would be great. Because, you know, oftentimes if you search health, you just get a lot of people talking about like supplements or, you know, certain nutritional things. But, you know, for me, like I want to learn more about actual healthcare, right? And so something like this that would curate that for me would be valuable. One thing that I would encourage you to do is, so when you dive into a niche like this, right? You're taking a general concept that there's a lot of players within, and you're carving out a niche for yourself. So when you do that, there's opportunities to specialize the platforms in ways that competitors could not do, right? Because it would just be too weird to like ask someone what diseases they're interested in on YouTube, you know? So did you have any thoughts as to what those differentiators might be for this?
You mean like how to differentiate myself from like other platforms?
Yeah, from the generalizers, like what would you be able to do with this focus on a niche market like healthcare? But how might you be able to leverage that to make your platform different? What features might you focus on?
I think that is definitely a good question that I haven't really thought about as much. But like I guess like one very good differentiator for this is that you can really it's like very, very specific to the medcare field. So you can pretty much search for like you know, like the most recent technologies in the med field that's really hard to find in the other platforms. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to put it. It's this categories is probably where you might want to focus, or learning more about the user and then matching them with the right videos based on their specialty, things like that. So that, I think those would be great things to focus in on if you were to pursue this as a prototype. Tristan, I think you're chatting. Did you have any questions?
Oh, I just had an idea, like one thing to expand, maybe you could have, instead of having just a simple podcast, you could have, you know, a live professional doing a surgery and have people watch while he can, you know, walk through steps or kind of a tutorial type of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Cool. Thanks so much, Angelo. All right. Next up, we have Maria. And Maria, your audio when you asked the question was a little bit is windy. So your audio works this time around. But just so you know.
Moving inside, that might help.
Okay, great.
Okay, give me a second.
It sounds much better now.
I'm just running inside really quickly.
Okay, you know what? Let's go with Scott next then. Give you a chance to go inside. And am I going at a good pace right now, or do I need to give you all a little bit of a rest to do your assessments?
I think the piece is good so far.
Okay, good. All right, take it away, Scott.
All right. So for my user story, I have, as a patient, I want to be able to schedule an in-house doctor appointment within a short time frame so I can get the immediate care I need. So I designed an app. The potential name could be Rapid Doc. So it's an app you download from the App Store, and this is what the first page the user will see. They're going to enter their email address, their date of birth, and choose a password to create an account. After that, they'll enter like their name, their phone number, and gender. And then they will enter their health insurance information. So they'll click on this box and start typing in like what health insurance they have. For example, they could type in Oscar Health, and it will bring them to a screen where they can type in like their member ID and their group ID information. And one thing to note is that this app can be used without health insurance. So for someone who doesn't have health insurance, they can still use this app. And next, they would need to enable their location services because the doctor is going to be coming to their location wherever they are, like their house, apartment. So they do need to share their location with the app. Next, the next step is to start typing in what symptoms they have. And once they start typing the symptoms in, it will auto-populate and like show, potential symptoms that the patient has. Once they've like checked which symptoms they have, so it's kind of weird, but another screen is going to pop up and it will have like general symptoms that they may have. And the list could be a lot longer than this. I just added a few in here so you guys get an idea. And then a next step is to choose the duration, like how long they've had the symptoms they're having. So if they're having a cough, for example, they can like slide this like a 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. In order to better determine what treatment or care they need, they'll also need to answer questions like if they're taking any medications, do they have any allergies, recent surgeries, any medical conditions. So just a simple yes or no. And once the app has like all this information, it will show a map with potential doctors in their area. And they are able to filter by doctors. So you're able to filter by like price, average rating of the doctor, stuff like that. And once I had an idea of to like have like a little money symbol. I forgot to add this in here for like to show you like how expensive this doctor is going to be, taking into consideration like if your health insurance is going to pay for it or if you are paying for it out of pocket. So once you confirm, which doctor you would like to come to your house, he will then come to you and you'll be able to get the care that you need. And that's my presentation.
Great, thanks so much. Any questions for Scott? So I'll lead. One question is, I think this is definitely a useful tool. Where do you see the data coming from? So, that there's so much data on like which doctors might be nearby and all of that. Do you see this being user generated or from some database?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that it would kind of be like Uber where there will be like a separate like login information for like a physician. So they can, create an account and then upload their credentials and all that stuff. And so that's where that information would come from. And what was the other question? Sorry.
No, I think that answers it. So I think, and the reason I asked was so that I could ask this next question, which is, based on that, what features do you think you might need to build into the app to make it something that the doctors would use so that their information could be populated? What do you think would be, I guess, next steps to concentrate to make that work right?
I guess I would have to like build another wireframe for what that would look like for the physician. To be honest, I haven't gone that much in depth on that end. I was more focused on the patient end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fine. But that might be something that you end up focusing on if you pursue this as a prototype is, okay, so it's kind of they call this a two-sided marketplace, which is difficult to roll out. But when you do roll it out, it's sometimes tremendously successful. Some of the most successful companies out there right now are built that way. And so figuring out how can you build something that would be used by both sides, the patients and the doctors, and what might be your secret sauce that'll make it work on both ends would be I think, interesting thing to focus in on. Angelo, I see you have a question.
Yeah, my question is kind of like, since a lot of physicians are normally like really busy and they have very like packed schedules. What is like the one incentive that you can probably implement to this app for physicians to actually, be on call and use this app?
Yeah. Well, I know a lot, obviously physicians are very busy, but there are some that are not as busy as others. Like, I just know this from experience, like following doctors on social media, like some of them are like picking up different gigs and doing stuff like that. So, there could be other doctors out there that, have some extra free time on their hands where they want to like make some extra money doing this. And also from reading like different books and stuff, I found out that a lot of doctors do actually enjoy doing the in-house visits. I mean, not necessarily for a different patient every single time, I guess, but, could be a use.
All right, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think if you really wanted to disrupt things, you could say this is a way for doctors to be their own bosses, and they're sort of entrepreneurs getting paid directly by the insurance companies for doing these pickups as opposed to sort of working through these staffing agencies. The way that doctors sort of are employed is very strange in this country. And so this might be a way to break free from that. Now, of course, that means you have to fight a lot of entrenched bureaucracy, but that might be a very interesting way for doctors to become their own bosses in a way. Also might make it more feasible for, say, a small town doctor to just stay in that small town. And maybe this app is just how they connect with all of their patients, as opposed to right now where the model is that the doctors are sort of in whatever the nearest larger town is, but that might be 3 hours away for some of these rural countries or rural villages or towns. So I think there's a lot of different ways you could spin this for really changing healthcare. I think I saw another question pop up in the chat.
I just mentioned that we would potentially want to think about like Hipaa violations and like insurance policies. I know you mentioned that you don't necessarily need insurance for this, Scott. So as a person who uses insurance, I would want to ensure that this service is covered through my insurance, or even just ensuring like Hipaa is compliant.
Yeah, so I guess that would be, I haven't really thought far into that, but I guess the app would have to have some way to be able to connect with like the insurance companies to like, and to make sure that, it actually is covered, because the app would tell you whether or not, this is covered under your health insurance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Scott. Next up, Maria.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes, much better.
Thank you. Okay, all right, thank you, everyone. So my user story, here's like a broad overview. So as a patient that needs life-saving medications daily, I want a faster and more reliable form of receiving my medications by living in a rural area. So here, the medication I really want to focus in today is like for a diabetic patient. So as a diabetic patient, my drugs delivered via drone technology so that I can better manage my disease when living in a rural area and have better access to my care by reducing my transportation to a pharmacy. So this is obviously difficult for a person who's diabetic because one, it's very far into their stage, it's difficult for them to move, especially if they live in a rural area. It's difficult for them to receive their medication. So by having a easier way of receiving medications to their home and faster, it can obviously help their life of care and their disease management. So different functions that I wanted to focus in on my app particularly were whereas the patient is able to order and refill all of their prescriptions on one single application. Here they have the option to choose what kind of pickup service or delivery options that they want. So it doesn't necessarily have to be via drone technology, but I'll explain the other options as I go through my wireframe design. And then for the drone transportation, patients will be able to choose where they want it dropped off. So it could be dropped off for the home, or it could be dropped off at like other locations nearby. And then also the patients will decide when, where, and what time to have the package dropped off. So here is the first interface that I created, which is like the user login. And so my company is going to be called Medrone, but I could potentially change the name. And then here the user will log in or register. There's various buttons, and then they also have the option of finding a pharmacy or finding a facility. From there, it'll guide them to the second interface. It's pretty much the home screen. So here they have like various options in a scroll bar menu where they're able to see like the different pharmacies, review their prescriptions, their ordering information, get online care, or call for care if they need anything. Then the next interface that they'll go into, assuming that the user chooses the pharmacy option, it'll show them the various medications that they have within their medical portfolio. So in this case, for this patient, they have insulin and prednisone, and the patient needs to refill their insulin prescription and order it. So here the user clicks on the insulin, so they add to cart. And then from there, once in their cart, they're able to choose what type of delivery service they want. So they could either get it delivered via drone, they can pick it up in the pharmacy, or they can mail it to home using a carrier like UPS or FedEx. And so here the option, the user chooses the drone delivery and submits the option with this button. And then here I really want to focus in on where the user and how the user interacts with the application to select the drop-off site for their insulin. So here, once they go into this next window, the user will choose where, when, and what time. But they'll also have other options where they're able to set the destinations on the map just by clicking on this button, or they're able to choose from various saved locations where they've dropped off in the past. So focusing first on this top part, the user will then go to this next interface where they'll have a drop-down location as when they're searching. So for example, like if you go to Google and you type in an address, it'll give like other various options. So here I can zoom in. So you typed in like 55 rain, and then it'll give other options. For the calendar date or time in which they want the medication dropped off, they'll be just able to click date, and then it'll appear here. And then they'll be able to pick a time. And picking the time is important because a lot of drugs are temperature sensitive. So the user really has to be there when the drone technology is dropped off. And then they'll go into, if they wanted to choose from save locations, then they could pick from one of the options that's already there. And then after the user chooses the date, time, and place, then it'll confirm here, or the user will be instructed to confirm. And then they click submit, and then the drug has been delivered at that point or has been ordered. And then they'll have various options or buttons or links to return to either order another prescription or return back to home or get the necessary help that they need. And that's it for my user story.
Great, thanks so much. Does anyone have any questions for Maria?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I thought it was a really cool idea. I think drones are awesome, and I think that that's kind of the future. What kind of would incentivize someone to go through the drone delivery process instead of just getting it delivered from like CVS Delivery or Amazon? Or is that just not possible with those services?
So through the research that I did and in working for a company, it's kind of difficult to get certain drugs delivered like UPS carriers, or it takes longer. So patients who need like faster delivery services of certain medications, drone technology is a lot faster and more effective for them to receive it. Also, I think that later on, manufacturers are going to try to cut out the middleman of like having CVS or like Amazon or whoever delivers, and they can ship it out directly from the manufacturing site. So by having drone technology, I think they'll be able to reach a wider amount of individuals. So I think that it's kind of like very futuristic, but I think it's starting to hit the market soon.
Any other questions? So I really like this. It's a great example of taking a technology that obviously you're not going to build during this class. You're not going to have this drone setup, but you've shown that there's still a lot that you can build as a prototype, and then just assuming that the drone part will be able to plug in. So I think you're able to show a lot of the different features that would work, assuming that the drone sort of, that might be your hardware department that's working on that. And then you're the software department doing that. So I think you did a great job on that. And then also to answer Justin's question, there are a lot of drone medical delivery companies that are starting to crop up to meet populations where current delivery models don't work. A great example is in Africa. There's a company called Zipline that's doing a lot of work in Africa. I encourage you all to check it out. But they actually have, it's not the helicopter drones, it's the planes. And they'll deliver entire crates of drone or of medications to remote villages. And they'll go, I mean, literally they'll drop a crate off in the middle of a rainforest. And sometimes that's the only contact that village will have. And it'll be life-saving medication for them. So I think there's definitely a use case, even in the United States. I'm sure there are areas that are just outside of the delivery zones of a CVS, right? If I live, maybe on a reservation in Montana, a drone might actually be the most effective way to get some of these deliveries. So I think there's definitely a need. And I think building this interface can help draw out what are some of the best ways to address the need from the user interface perspective. Okay, thanks so much. Next up is Justin.
Perfect. I'll share my screen. So I went a little bit of a different route, but still kind of try to make them as healthcare focused as possible. So my user story is a little bit more less on the patient side and more on the doctor side, and thinking about them as a person. So as a person working in the healthcare industry, he or she would like to be able to find someone to be able to meet up with or spark a connection and explore it based on personality and compatibility. So I identified that a lot of other dating apps that are being developed are mostly based on external concepts. Rather, Meet My Match would be more focused on shared interests, commonalities, and compatibility. Meet My Match takes dating back to the basics and helps find someone who is more compatible rather than looks solely. We do an understanding of people's personalities through 3 different ways: through individual personality tests, love languages, and what type of doctor their personality both matches with. And I'll kind of take us through the rest of the app. So first off, you'll be able to go see the personality type. So if you go through the personality quiz, you'll be able to begin the personality quiz, which will take you over to this external link, which goes over the 16 personality tests. And as you'll be able to see here, it kind of describes about what each of those kind of means. Once someone actually begins the test, they can retake the test at any time, and this helps develop their profile. This is also the same for the doctor typing test. So they'll be able to begin a survey, which goes over different kind of personality questions, which will identify one of 5 different areas that their personality most aligns with. So if someone is more patient with children and now is able to kind of able to take care of patients and parents, they most likely align with family medicine. This would also happen also with the love languages. Each of these can also be navigated back if you start clicking on one of these different tabs, and the love languages are associated here. Once you complete kind of your profile, you'll be able to find other people that are similar. So you'll be able to go to the Meet Your Match page where you'll be able to find eligible bachelors in the area, and I'll be able to go through the settings where you'll be able to mostly focus on the description of the individual, and you'll be able to find whether you like that person or whether you do not. This is mostly geared towards physicians, as it'll be mostly based on the marketing strategy. And with this being an MVP, it'll be most targeted towards the physicians, but then could be outsourced to all eligible bachelors. So we'll go through this person's profile. Alana is a nurse practitioner who enjoys spending time with her family and friends. All of this is editable as well. When she isn't helping patients, she is watching Netflix. She enjoys long walks on the beach and into the sunset. The 3 different bullet points under here are based on her personality, love language, and doctor type tests. Based on her personality, she's extroverted. She enjoys words of affirmation and quality time, and she identifies as a pediatrician. Next, you'll be able to go through your own personal profile, where you can be able to select a photo of yourself, edit your specific profile and some of your descriptions, and go through your matches. Each of these can be edited throughout the entire site. Next, you can go through your matches. You'll be able to go see the different people that you were able to match with and go through each of the conversations. Here's an example of some of the conversations that you can have. And it's mostly based on the compatibility, as that will be kind of the spark at the beginning. The settings will also be able to help individuals customize kind of who they want based on the different gender, based on their location, age, person, and then these 3 are specific to the app, as they'll be able to choose whether they want someone based on their same personality test, love language, and doctor type. If they select one, that will affect the type of matches that they see, and they'll be able to find someone with the same personality or the same doctor typing as them. This is just a prototype, but would love some feedback. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Justin? Okay, I'll start. So with these apps, I know so much of the differentiator, it seems, is the matching and at what point you're allowed to talk to each other. So could you walk me through a little bit of how that works? I know you're matching based on love language, personality, things like that. But then I see there's also sort of like a swipe left, or swipe right function. What sort of is the deal maker there, right? Like what, and how does it work? And can I message anyone, or do we both have to match?
So I envision it as you would both have to match, and then you could start messaging someone, but these would be used as filtering processes. So if you just want to find someone with the same personality test, or I potentially can consider having opposites, almost considering like opposites attract, so someone with an opposite personality quiz could also be shown up in your feed. But mostly these would be used as filtering services, which you could turn on and off in the settings.
Yeah. And you know, one nice thing about the fact that you're inputting a lot of this information, right? It's sort of the old school model. Although, you know, I haven't used these new apps, but I get the sense that it's more just like swiping based on looks. And so there's not a lot of data in it. Whereas yours is going back to like the eHarmony where they input a lot of data and match people through that. And so with that data, that gives you the ability to figure out what works and what doesn't, right? So you can see, is it opposites attract? Is it, you know, birds of a feather flock together, and then adjust your algorithm as you move forward with new data. Another question I have is, since you're gearing this towards the healthcare audience, are there any aspects of working in healthcare that you think you might want to build into this app to accommodate just the realities of dating as a doctor, or nurse, or healthcare worker?
I was thinking about that for a little bit. If individuals want to go put in their like availability, or what time they get off, or what time their breaks are. But I think that is a little bit too much, and to be like, oh, this is my, and then you can find someone with that same type, that same hour that you're free. I don't know if that kind of would make too much sense. I feel like that it might be something where if you want to find someone based on location. You can also maybe find someone based on hospital, what hospital people are working at. That could be something that I can be able to add into. But I'm up for more thoughts about how to be able to gear this specifically just to doctors. But I envision the MVP for doctors, but then also just if this app becomes into fruition, to make it for a lot of other people too.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions for Justin?
Justin, what's MVP again?
That's the minimally viable product.
Oh, most valuable person. Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, thank you. Professor's like, I know. I know what MVP is. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yes, it confused me when I first learned it. I was so used to most valuable player. It's probably a poorly chosen acronym. All right, any other questions for Justin? All right, next up, we are getting towards the end, is Joanne.
Sorry, I put it into a PowerPoint, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanne. I'll be presenting on my wireframe mockup on an idea. Just imagine if all of your health data was in one place. I present to you my health story, your master health record one-stop shop. I'd like to pose a question. When was the last time y'all went to the doctors? Did you have to fill out some forms, tell your healthcare team about your medical history, prescriptions, etc. again? You don't have to answer. As graduate students and professors, it may seem like it's a simple task to fill out forms, recall your medical history and prescriptions. Now, I'd like to ask, when was the last time you accompanied a loved one to a doctor's office? Were you also a translator there for your loved one? Well, what if I told you that my health story has an option for language accessibility to change the information from English to the language of your choice? So let's get started. Okay, so here's the website and the home page. Next is About Us. Now let's log in or create an account. For the user story, as a patient, I want to be able to have a place that stores all of my medical information so that I am able to easily assess it when I want to. Okay, so here we can find a one-stop hub to be able to keep track of appointments, demographic information, medical history, prescription, a daily log, providers, a list of providers, your insurance, and your medical report. And on the bottom, you can change the language as you'd like. User story number 2. As a patient, I would want to keep track of all of my appointments so that I am able to prioritize my health and attend my appointments. So here, patients are able to add their appointments and it would auto-populate up here. You can see your previous appointments and your current one. So let's say you need to see Dr. Castillo on June 30th at 1 p.m. It's a follow-up for your family physician. Just remember to bring your insurance card. So you can easily add appointments. And you can also print this out as well as send this to your online calendar. As a patient, I want to be able to track all of my daily measurements and activities so that I can see the trends of my health, overall health. And then as for the primary care physician, I want to be able to see the trends in my patient's vitals and activities so that I can help them figure out a plan to better manage their health. So here, patients can log in their daily activities such as their exercise, water intake, if they're concerned about their weight or blood pressure or blood sugar levels, they can add that by changing or modifying the information that you want to put in your daily log. And then with this, patients are able to download their data or print it out for their provider, or if they want to see like a personal trainer or a nutritionist, they're able to do that as well. And they are also able to generate a graph, maybe just like their blood pressure, to see the trends of that. Okay, so as a patient, I want to be able to keep track of my medical records so that I am able to provide this information to my provider and learn more about my health. And then on the provider side, I want to be able to access my patient's medical records so I can get a big picture of their health and see the differences in their health. So here with the medical records, patients are able to kind of just congregate all of their information from like different doctors' offices or hospitals and just save it in this one platform, My Health Story. So that's easily accessible. So clicking on these links, well, they'll be able to open it or download it. So down here, they're also able to send it. Let's say if a doctor was requesting it, they're able to do that as well. As a patient, I want to be able to have a place that stores my demographic information so that if I go into the emergency room and I'm flustered filling out my information, I can easily find it here. As an ER admitting staff, I want to be able to quickly enter the patient's information so that they can be in the system and ready to be triaged as soon as possible. So that's this page here where patients have their information up top, emergency contacts, and if they have a living will or advance directive. So this is very beneficial in terms of like when patients are in distress and they're in like a lot of pain and aren't able to fill out their forms. If they're able to just hand over the login information, then they can just, everything would be available for the registration staff. And then this is also helpful in emergencies where if a patient was unconscious, family members could be contacted. And if a patient happened to be DNR, do not resuscitate, then the staff would know what to do. As a patient, I want to be able to have all of my information readily available and accessible for my healthcare team so that I don't miss anything that I may have forgotten. So as a provider, to have everything together in one place so myself and my colleagues are able to spend more time with my patients instead of asking the same questions over and over again. So here with all the patient's information, allergies, immunization records, family history, it's all available. So this also prevents physicians from like giving an extra flu shot or like a Tdap when it's supposed to be like every 10 years and then they forgot. So that's good to have. Another user story. As a patient, I want to be able to log all of my prescriptions in case I forget them. So that I don't miss a dose or accidentally take an extra dose. For the providers, they might want to know what they've given to the patient before that's discontinued, or they might want to know what's their current medication list to quickly just refill the medication and make sure that there's no drug-drug interactions. Here, same thing, patients are able to download and print their information. They can, prescriptions, they can update their prescription information, which will auto-populate here. Their pharmacy information is also here. And then the doctors will also know where to send the e-script if that's available. So in the ER, there's a lot of patients that don't remember what's the name of their medication. So this is pretty nice to have handy. As a patient, I want to be able to have a place where I can save my provider's information so that I may quickly contact them instead of fumbling through many business cards, which actually happens a lot in the emergency room. When the doctors ask if a patient knows who their family doctor is or if they have a specialist. So the ER doctor or providers would be able to quickly get that information. And everything's listed out here. Patients can pre-print it and bring it to their appointments or have it on their phone. As a patient, I want to be able to have a place to keep my insurance information so that I may seek care if I didn't bring my insurance card. And then for providers so that they can bill insurances accordingly. Although in the emergency room, we don't necessarily check for insurance until after you're done seeing the doctor, because we see all of our patients with or without insurance. It's good in the sense that to have it, because if the patient is admitted, we would need to know which doctor to admit them to, or if they need to be transferred, so their insurance would cover for them. And then that way, when the patient is discharged, they're not concerned and worry about, oh, is this in network or out of network? And insurance information you can update here. And then lastly, you can log out. And then, but wait, if you have any questions or concerns, you can contact us here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Joanne?
Not really a question, but a comment. I think what you were kind of describing is completely real. I think it's incredibly useful to be able to have that all in one place. I know kind of just taking care of my grandparents, and my mom's taking care of my grandparents, all that stuff is just, I mean, it's all in their head, but it's hard to be able to kind of articulate medical history. So having that all in one spot would be really helpful.
Yeah, one thing that I think the thing that I liked the most about this particular presentation was that you kept bringing it back to, in the emergency room, we noticed blah, blah, blah. Like we noticed fumbling through business cards. Of all the features, was the one that you felt was the most particularly challenging or the most in need of fixing among all the features?
Wait, sorry, what is your question?
Was there one feature or one problem that you observed in the ER that you felt was the most pressing need to fix of all the features that you noticed or that you worked on with this wireframe?
I think from my personal experience working in the emergency room as an admitting clerk, I do notice a lot of patients with the language barrier and don't have family members with them. So it's if they're able to have this, then it'd be great. For the most part, if patients are Chinese speaking, then I take the time to fill everything out for them. But it is hard for folks that I'm not able to really communicate with.
Gotcha. And the nice thing about the translation part is that could be useful even if the patient doesn't already have all their information inputted. I think there's ways in which you could make that work for your emergency room department. Even just with a random patient who comes in. So that might be something to look at focusing even deeper into. Another thing I noticed, and I think one of the challenges with an app like this is actually getting the patients to use it, right? And putting all their information in the first place. I noticed that you had a feature that said something about incentivizing them to fill something out. Could you speak a little bit to what your thinking was there?
I guess for that specifically, it's because I want to be a doctor. So I was thinking if I go into family medicine, then I would want to kind of have a system in place for my patients so that my staff would enter all of that information for them and maybe put it on hypothetically, if it's possible, give them an ID card so hospital staff can just scan the barcode.
Yeah.
So that would be easy access in that sense. And then if they hit their streak, then we would give them a gift So like my friend and I was kind of just thinking like a whole like wellness center in like our clinic if we ever were to be able to open one. And then like, you know, maybe just like free groceries and stuff like that. They're like, yeah, healthy options.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I really like that the approach of looking at what's wrong in your workplace and then trying to fix it, right? Because I think so often, and everyone's going to see this as you progress in your careers, there's always a point where someone's like, man, someone should build a better way to do this. Someone should build an app for this. And then no one does anything. 99%, probably higher than 99%, never do anything about it. And then sometimes it lingers for years until one person decides to do something about it. And then they fix it, everyone's life is improved and they're millionaires. So I think being empowered to, instead of say, I wish there was an app for that, to actually make that could be life-changing on many different levels. So I think this is a good example of that. So thank you so much. Okay. Go ahead. One more question.
Yeah. I really like your idea, Joanne. And I was thinking about that ID card thing. And I know like Apple already has like the medical ID that you can access on the lock screen. So maybe you could have like an app that can access from like the wallet or whatever, and then it would be like a QR that you can scan like you were talking about.
Definitely. Yeah, I think a QR code would work seamlessly with that. And then you just have to think about what level of privacy. Does that have to be like a QR scan plus a password or something like that the patient would then tell them what that password is. But I think there's definitely, and there's other ways too. In fact, I think if you look at social media in Asia, they're a lot better at that. And I don't know all the details, but I know there's like phone bumps that you can do to transfer information and all that we're just sort of, for whatever reason, we never really caught that bandwagon in the States. But I think some of those technologies might be good to apply in some of these healthcare information transfer cases. Okay.
Thank you for all the ideas.
So, John, last presentation.
Sweet. Let me get it.
Oh, wait, not the last presentation. Sorry. We also have Danny.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Can you see this okay?
Yes.
So I guess my idea was augmented reality for surgery. And so the user case that I was envisioning was a surgery intern wanting like a guided procedure and having like an added safety measure to know where they're going and like what areas they're supposed to be operating on, as well as having all the necessary information presented to them all in like one visual area. So they didn't have to be looking back and forth. They're not focusing on what they're doing. And so in this first area, they select the procedure. I just looked up some common surgical procedures, and it starts off, this is all the visual area of the AR like headset or goggles. And it goes into a live visual of the patient. I didn't want to put anything like gory, so it's just a live visual. And by default, nothing would be selected. There'd be nothing distracting, so they can get their bearings. And then these two toggles. So this first toggle could be like to put on the vitals, so they could see what vital signs are necessary for this procedure. Just saying like heart rate or what's going on, so they can understand how their patient is doing in this procedure. And then moving on, we could have the augmented reality for these areas of interest or the areas that they need to avoid and not be working on. And so obviously for each procedure, it'd be more specific and they'd be zoomed in, and the software would be, detecting which organs are there. And so there'd be a toggle also for the augmented reality overlay. So if it's getting in the way, it's getting too much. First of all, it would be designed not to be too much, but if they did want to toggle it on or off, it's an easy switch right there. And then this is just a close-up view of what the AR overlay would be. So if there was like key areas of interest, it'd be indicated here, and definite areas of not to be. There could also be alerts associated with the vitals. So you could be notified when the heart rate has dropped to a significant level or there's bleeding being detected. And so I could see this being used mainly as like a teaching tool, but also if it was developed to a point where surgeons could use it all the time and be guided, and it's another added safety measure, so there'd be less error. And I could see that being beneficial to patients, to the providers, as well as like there could be recording for, insurance purposes. Of course, there's privacy associated with that, but like it's kind of like a backup or like, just in case. And I don't have a cool name for it, but this is it.
Great. Thanks, John. Does anyone have any questions?
John, would this interface be like on an application or would it be on the phone?
So whatever has like, I guess when I'm thinking of, like a headset for augmented reality, a lot of people, well, things that have been used so far have been like, I guess you could think of like Google Glass, even though that's not developed as much anymore, or like they do have like VR with the phone where you could like see the camera feed and it's placed in a headset in front of you. I guess I could see challenges in like understanding depth with that kind of thing. So I haven't actually looked into a particular AR headset or something like that.
No worries. I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you.
The experience that I had with like AR and just thinking about that was like, wasn't like Pokemon Go and stuff like that. Wasn't that also AR? Would that be something that you could try implementing some of that technology?
Yeah, that kind of like, you mean like images and camera, like depth and all that?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Yeah. I wouldn't put like Pikachu on here, but yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is AR does not have to be as hard as it might sound at first blush. I think some of these things like figuring out which areas to avoid or what are, trouble spots, things like that, that's a little bit more difficult because you have to sense, what organ are you looking at and all of that. Yeah. But simply having something that displays the vitals in front of you as you're observing a surgery, that doesn't take a lot of intelligence on the part of the application. So you can start with some of those simpler features and then get more and more complex as you roll the product out to more and more people. I also really liked what you said with the rolling it out as people are training, because I think, fat chance getting a surgeon with decades of experience to use this. They're going to say, oh, it's terrible, I don't want to look through a screen. But when you catch someone at that training level, they're not doing anything anyway. They're just looking. And so having something that they can look through that's instructing them on, oh, this is what that is. This is why they're making that cut there. I think could, one, give them something that they need while at the same time getting them used to a platform that then sort of maybe you spend a couple of years doing it as a training platform. And then they say, well, why can't I bring my unnamed at the moment AR platform into my actual operations? And so it might be a good inroad into a world where a surgeon would typically just slam the door in your face, So with that in mind, are there any ideas for how you might be able to gear this towards that beachhead market, right? And by beachhead, I mean that initial market.
Yeah, I guess making it more education focused would be like, I had ideas for more like a checklist of what to do, or like there could be video overlay of what the procedure is supposed to look like while you're looking at a patient or a cadaver.
Great. Anyone else have any questions? All right, thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
And then last up is Danny.
Okay, let's see. Okay, can you guys see it?
Yes.
So for what I had planned was a mental health app, and the user story to support this is as a mental health patient, I want to be able to motivate myself so that I can improve and better manage my mental or overall health. My potential name is Ashente. It's kind of a term that I got from a show I watched, which kind of signifies people take a pledge towards something. And I would kind of use it as the same kind of reference for the app. And some functions that I would have or to support my user story would be that the users be able to manage their symptoms or add their symptoms in a sense. They'll be able to track their progress with their specific condition. They're able to learn therapies about their specific condition as well and get support. So for right here, this drop-down box, a patient will be able to pick from specific mental health illnesses or conditions. And as we know, or a lot of the time when a patient suffers from one specific illness, they might be dealing with another. Like if someone has anxiety, they might be at the same time dealing with depression, or if they have bipolar disease, they might be dealing with depression as well. And this is just a brief overlay of what the app will look like once the user logs in. They'll be able to search for whatever they kind of want to look for. Like if they're trying to look for a specific tool or a specific resource that they want to learn about, they could just search through there. They can, right here as well, they'll be able to manage their symptoms, like add new ones, erase ones that they believe aren't really impacting them as much as before. Here they'll be able to track their progress, which I will dive into a bit more in the presentation, as well as what they can learn and what kind of support they'll be provided with. And so this frame is showing or focusing more on the manage symptoms function that I just previously described. Here are some typical symptoms that a patient might be experiencing with a mental health illness, like sad hopelessness, or if they're confused, extreme mood changes, detachment from reality, excessive fears, and inability to cope with things. Say that if the user were to click on this specific symptom itself, they'll be taken to a page where they'll be asked what their current level of distress is. And this is mostly referring to how the symptom is impacting their overall quality of life in a sense. And they'll be able to adjust their intensity by just clicking the up and down arrows. And I couldn't really find a graphic that's interactive, but in a sense, I wanted to have like a thermometer here, and based on the intensity, it'll go up and down. And then right here is just a little demographic of what would show up if the user was to click the help button up here, just because some people might think it's a little weird or like they're not entirely sure what this might mean. So this will give a better description of what the this tool itself is generating for them or trying to help them with. And then the next frame is going to be in reference to the next button right here. So once the user clicks their or specifies their level of intensity, they'll click the next button and it'll pop up to this page. And depending on the intensity of their specific symptom, the app itself, I'm not sure how it might be in reference to the specific tool that I suggest. It might be based off their intensity and like, or some kind of other algorithm. But in the sake of this presentation, I put a tool that's specific for depression, and it's just a tool that kind of asks the user like for them to describe their strengths, just because with depression, a lot of people kind of tend to overlook what they're good at, and they kind of just focus on the negatives themselves. And if the user did happen to like this tool, they can like upvote it or downvote it, depending on what they preference. And if the user that doesn't like the tool, then they'll be able to generate a new one by just clicking this button right here. And then if they do choose to proceed with this tool, they would click this plus sign right here, and it'll lead to a specific page where they're asked for, where they get asked to list their strengths themselves, either through text or simply through an image that they think either like gives them strength or kind of depicts what their strength is about. Moving on, this is more so about the tracking page. How I envisioned users to be able to track their progress is by assessments. Most specifically, like they're asked a certain amount of questions, either like through context or how they feel in like certain situations, and how they correlate with those questions. And based off of their assessments, what would generate here is a graph where they'll be given a score range right here on the y-axis, and the x-axis is basically going to be the dates of when they took specific assessments, so that they can track their progress throughout the times they take the assessments. And they'll also be provided a score range at the bottom as well, which kind of tells them like how they're doing, or if it's getting better or worse. And then another thing that the user will be able to do is schedule an assessment, just because I think with this kind of thing, people can tend to overlook it, and like they might forget, oh, I'll just make up my assessment and do another day or something like that. What I would kind of want from this is that the users be able to set like a push notification that'll kind of remind them to just do an assessment regularly, like say for once a week or once a month, just so that they can stay consistent with their progress, and so they kind of don't slack on themselves. And then next focuses more on the learning aspect. Here, I just kind of have two general things where if a patient kind of just has like a general idea about their condition, they'll be able to, I guess, be able to learn more in depth about it, like what it is exactly, facts about it, how it develops, issues related to their condition, and etc. And then the other function would be for seeking professional help. And this is more so geared towards if they like if the user is considering or contemplating about seeking professional help, they might be able to look at what kind of therapies they might be benefit from, or if they are looking for a specific professional provider, then they might want to see like which one they might benefit from the most, like a therapist, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. And last but not least, I have the support function. The first one would be for crisis resources. In case of emergencies, users would be able to just click this, and they would be led to resources like, for example, I guess first thing would be calling 911, or they'll have other information such as like specific hotlines, text lines, or lifelines regarding to their specific condition. Or another possibility would be that they can add a personal contact in here who they think or they believe would be able to help them in case of emergencies. And the last one is, I would guess it's kind of similar to what I had listed in Learn, but it's more specific in actually finding professional care. So I think this would utilize more like outside resources of like being able to find local care around them, or just providers that might be able to treat them specifically for their condition. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thanks so much, Danny. Does anyone have any questions for Danny?
I had two comments for Danny, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the first one was, Danny, when we were doing the user stories in the first week of class, I think that's what it's called. I looked into this app by Pfizer that's called Motivator. And it was a very similar app where they would send like motivational quotes to people with depression. I tried to look for that, but I couldn't find it anymore. But maybe you can do some research on that and like maybe why it succeeded or why it failed. Just
Yeah,
like,
sure.
and then another thing, I know that your app could potentially not only help like people with depression, but it can also help with improving patient compliance and like patients being able to get daily reminders on like not only like motivation, but also to remind them to take their drug, because a lot of depression patients are on SSRIs, and so sometimes they don't end up taking the drug. So I think that you can find a way to incorporate that. And then you can also include patient reported outcomes where they can write in, like I know you had a part where it like tracks their progress, but also it can like link their physician to track like their diaries and see like how they're doing and their thoughts.
Yeah, those are definitely great ideas. I appreciate the feedback.
Any other questions for Danny? So I think this is great. I think there's a lot of really interesting features here that could be very valuable to the patients if used. So I think one thing that you'd want to focus on is how can you drive patient compliance with the app itself, and what might be some of the ways that you can either make it easier to use or make it more obvious that it's in their best interest, that sort of thing. And then sometimes it helps to pick a niche condition, right? Because if I see that this app was built specifically for me, then I'm like, well, I should definitely use this because it's built for me, right? And so thinking what might that specific to me be, whether you're focusing on one particular disease group or maybe just one geography, maybe it's only for people in LA, or maybe it's only for people who, you know, I don't know, watch anime or, you know, something like that, where it's like you're focusing in on a cultural component of your patient so that they're more likely to uptake the platform and make it useful for themselves, especially with something that's mental health related. I think that's where culture comes more and more into play. Is there a particular feature that you feel like is really the killer app feature within here?
I think the most beneficial thing from this would be managing their symptoms and tracking the progress.
Mm-hmm.
Just because a lot of time with mental health, patients don't really know how well they're doing at the time, and they can there's a lot of conflict in, I guess, how they can manage it itself. I know right now I work as a scribe at a family practice, and often when we do patients' physical exams, they have to go through a mental health assessment. It's very quick, and it's like 10 questions. And sometimes when the provider asks the patients like, oh, how are you doing with this specific thing, like based off the assessment, patients don't really know how to answer it that well, and they just get kind of confused by it.
Gotcha. Great. Well, I think this is something that would definitely be very helpful for these mental health patients. So good job. I think really focus though on like uptake and how are you going to make it appealing for an individual patient so that they actually fill it out.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So great job. I really liked the based on members filling this out every time. Okay. So please take note of that. Obviously, that's something that you're going to need to be on top of, but it's also an opportunity if you're the type who's not always, you know, as active and participating during the lectures. This is a great way to make up for that. So you can, if you have these thorough report outs on your stand-up meeting, and I can see your shared documents, then that can be a good way to sort of build up your participation points between lectures. Okay. Any questions about how that works? I want to make sure that you all are doing that, because I think one issue that we had last year is sometimes people would go a week without being in communication with their team. So I needed to make sure that there's a way of holding people accountable. And then those people who are really communicating, being thorough about what they've accomplished, what they're working on, they're able to shine. Okay. So emphasize sort of that being a team player throughout the project. So this you've already seen, but just a summary, going back to what Agile methodology is. So I just showed you the Scrum board. So that's a big part of what we're doing here. We talked about the sprint, daily stand-up. So all this stuff that I just mentioned in the last few slides, they're very much Agile methodology. So you're going to be practicing Agile in real time. Okay. Okay, so user testing. This is actually one of the very last theoretical concepts that we're going to talk about in this class. I think there are a couple more, but for the most part, after we cover user testing, it's going to be a lot of just nitty-gritty coding team projects. I want to turn you all into fully functional coders. So I'm going to use as much of the time that we have left in this course to do that. But this is the last thing I want to tell you before we get into that. User testing, as you all can imagine, incredibly important. I really emphasized while we talked about Agile, how important it is to use customer feedback as your feedback loop into making the product better. So the way to do that, user testing. A lot of studies have been done on what is the ideal number of users you should test with. And a lot of people have come up with 5. So does anyone know what the Pareto rule is? Has anyone heard of that? So the Pareto rule is basically that 20% of your issues are actually causing 80% of your loss in value, right? So if you focus on sort of the top 20% of issues that you've got going on, then you're actually going to take care of 80% of what you need to do. And it actually works in a lot of different ways. Like 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. People have used the Pareto Principle throughout all sorts of professional aspects of life. And so it definitely holds here. So if you really, this is what a Pareto curve looks like. Once you get to about 5, you've covered about 80% of your usability problems that you really need to be working on. So that's really the ideal amount of participants that you can do in user testing. So I want you to focus on user testing here, trying to get maybe 3 to 4 fellow students, but also try to get 1 to 2 members of your target demographic. So I know a few of you mentioned that you're working in the medical field. So I think those might be good people, or maybe some relatives that you have, friends in med school, so on and so forth, that you might be able to use for this target demographic. But the rest you can just use your fellow students. And please be very generous. I get to see who each team has user tested. So if I see that you helped user test for another team, I will smile upon that when I'm grading everyone. So it's not anything official, but please be generous with the other teams. If they ask you to user test, understand that sometimes it's hard to get people to user test with you. So volunteer your time, okay? Last thing, almost anyone can help with uncovering user experience issues. So it really doesn't matter for again, 80% of your users, just use random people off the streets, but then try to get 1 or 2 who are sort of these professional target audience members that are going to be able to really understand what their daily life workflow looks like and can bring that insight to your project. So there are 2 major forms of user testing methods. The first is concurrent, which means that the user is sharing their thoughts with you while you're testing. So this is sort of where you're peering over their shoulder and they're just talking as they're using your platform. And the advantages of this are that you're going to be capturing their thoughts while they're still fresh, right? So if someone like brings up a new page and they go, oh, then you see that and you can capture that and make sure that you're really observing in real time. The disadvantage is that the actual talking, and especially when that talking brings discussion, can distract from what they're supposed to be doing. And it makes that user experience a little bit less realistic, right? Because normally if they're using your platform, they're in a room by themselves in silence, you know? And so you're sort of betraying that reality of what a normal user is going to be doing. They also call that think aloud. So it's, and you sort of prep them ahead of time. You say, I want you to, like, whatever you're saying, just say it out loud, or whatever you're thinking, just say it out loud. And then you're taking those notes down. So it's just a good way to peer into their mind. But of course, you lose a little bit of that fidelity to what the user experience should be. Retrospective is where the user shares their thoughts after they test. The advantages are that, again, it's more realistic. It's more accurate to what that user experience is actually like. But they're going to forget probably half the stuff that they had in their mind as they were using it. When you use a retrospective method, you can actually just observe their behaviors rather than what they say. So you sort of lose that ability to read their mind, but you can still sort of read their actions. Okay, so neither one of these methods is better or worse than the other. It's sort of more what you feel is working the best for you. So I would encourage you to use maybe the two different methods for the first two user tests you do. And then you can, for the rest of them, use the one that you liked the most. Okay, so some techniques for moderating. Number one, try to use a test script. So don't just try to wing it. Have a script for what you want to say. I gave you a link to some of these scripts that you can use. Another tip is you don't want just opinions, right? Because everyone's got an opinion on everything. Like, oh, I think this button should be purple. I think it should be yellow. I think it should be red, green, whatever. That's not important. You just want areas where you can improve. So try to focus on identifying areas that are confusing. So where you can actually see them confused when you're looking over their shoulder, or they're actually telling you that they're confused, and try to make that more clear. I think that's the main thing you can focus on, is if it's not obvious to them how they can achieve whatever they're supposed to achieve through the platform, try to figure out why and then fix that, okay? Try to set the stage for the user, but don't guide them. The best response to any questions they have is not to give them answers, but to say, well, what do you think? Because really, it's like, anyone ever try to take care of a houseplant and didn't do a very good job at it? Right? It's usually because you overwatered it, or you try to take too much care of it as opposed to you neglected it, although sometimes it is neglect, not gonna lie. But in this case, it's similar to that. It's over moderating, trying to answer too many of their questions, being too much a part of that user testing experience. That's how you ruin it. So as much as possible, try to be a ghost in the room, but a very observant ghost, and a ghost that can help right size or realign a user testing if it happens to be going off the rails, okay? And then finally, try to compare what the user is telling you versus what they're actually doing. Okay, so they might be saying, oh, this is great, but they're like not at all using the app the way that you intended it to be used. Or they might say, oh, I don't like this button's stupid. They might be very negative in what they're telling you, but they actually might be using it exactly the way you want to use it. So try to compare those two against each other so that you can get a good idea for, is this app working the way that I want it to work? Any questions about that? All right, so let's walk through an example test section or session. So you'll start by welcoming the user, explain what you're doing. A lot of these users are not going to be familiar with what user testing even is. So explain that you want them to think aloud if that's what you're doing, or you want them to sort of be animated in how they're using it, but don't talk if you don't want them to be talking. But just sort of explain to them what a usability test is And that link that I sent you is a good script that does that. You also want to get some information from them. So demographic questions for them. You want to know, how old are they, male or female? Do they work in the medical industry? So you can understand what kind of user is giving you this data. After that, establish the setting. So none of your users are going to be using the platform because you told them to be a part of the user testing, right? For the most part, they're using it because they're sick and they need medication delivered to them, or they're walking up to the emergency room check-in and they need help. So establish that setting, try to put them in that world before you start the user testing, so they can think in that mindset. Once they start the task, ensure that they are, if you're using the think aloud, ensure that they are doing that by, if they're being too silent, you can just every once in a while interject and say, what are you thinking right now? Okay, so like that, by asking them, what are you thinking right now? You're not leading them. You're not saying, oh, why aren't you clicking that button? You don't want to do that. You just want to say very broadly, what are you thinking right now? And then when they tell you, just say, oh, great, right? Don't interfere too much, but try to understand what's going on. Only try to guide them if they're like really going off the rails and they're not doing at all what you wanted. But of course, if they're not doing what you want, that's information in and of itself, right? That's telling you that you need to put more guide rails into the product, okay? And then as they're working, note their behavior, note any comments they make, any errors they make, as well as any tasks that they successfully complete. And then afterwards, and this is very, very important, once you're done, now suddenly you can be a real person. So do that debrief, do a deep dive, ask them how the experience was, any recommendations they have, get as much information as you can at step number 4. Create a little playbook for you all. So, and this is actually from the link that I sent out, but if you're not sure what the user is thinking, some questions, just ask them, what are you thinking? What are you looking at? What are you doing at now? Try to look for instances in which the user is surprised, whether that's verbally, they're like, ah, or if they're just, you see their eyes wide, and try to look for those cues of like, something happened that they didn't expect. And is it a pleasant surprise? Is it an unpleasant surprise? And it's fair game to ask them, hey, did you expect that to happen? And see what they say. If the user is asking you, they're trying to use you as a crutch, which they really shouldn't be doing because users are not going to have you on a daily basis. Try to deflect and say, well, what would you do if I wasn't here to help you? And then why don't you go and try to do that, right? Or I'd like you to do what you normally would do. If they make a comment that you don't fully understand, just try to dive deeper, right? Try to read their mind by having them tell you what's on their mind. If they're starting to get, and this is very normal, sometimes they get insecure about, they think that they're not being helpful. In fact, I would say half the time that this happens, just be very encouraging. Say, oh, no, this is very helpful. This is exactly what they need. If they're screwing up, that's when they're most likely to be insecure. And that's actually when they're being the most helpful. So it's sort of counterintuitive to them. And it's good to emphasize that to them. It's saying, look, this is exactly what we need to know so that we can make the platform better and more mistake-proofed in the next version, okay? If they ask you to explain how something works, again, try to deflect it back to them. Anything where they're asking you to explain, which is gonna happen, try to deflect that into, well, what do you think? Because you're not really supposed to guide them in a user testing. And then if they do go off the rails, try to ask them why they're going off the rails. And then if they really can't figure it out, just sort of do a reset, give them a little bit of a clue of what they should be doing, maybe debrief briefly about why they got lost, and then move forward, okay? In that first version, they're probably gonna go off the rails because your products are gonna be very, very imperfect. And so don't be discouraged. Just take that as inputs for you to improve the product. Any questions about user testing and sort of what the purpose of it is?
Professor, you mostly do user testing when you actually have a coded product, correct? Not when you have.
That is true, but what I would like you to do is not this coming week, but the week after, I want you to do a user test with your mockups, just so that you can get some early user input. And then later on, as you get to some of the final weeks, then you can do a last ditch user testing to make sure you work out any kinks. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, this is actually, that slide shouldn't be here. But in terms of assignments, I want you to complete Code Academy, lessons 3 through 6 of CSS. And then soon thereafter, we will be starting JavaScript, and then you'll have mastery of all of the coding languages that you need to know. Anyone have any burning questions about the code lessons that they're learning? Is it all pretty straightforward?
I had a question not related to the lessons, but where we would start coding our projects.
Yes, great question. That's actually the next thing I'm going to show you all in the next 5 minutes or so before we break. And then I want you to initiate your Scrum team. Okay. So again, we can start that tomorrow. Today, if you have any concerns about your team, just let me know and I'll make some rearrangements. At that point, we'll assume that the teams are finalized, and then we can start the Scrum team information. And then, like I said, a lot of my focus in the coming lectures is going to be sort of in-class coding exercises where I'll be doing some coding in front of you, and then we can break out into our teams and then work on that together. And I can answer any individual team questions that you all have. Okay. Okay, so to answer Tristan's question, I would actually like you all right now to go to https://github.com. And I'll put it in the chat, but you all should just be able to type it. URL. So does anyone know what GitHub is? Cool. I saw a couple nods. So anyone want to tell me what you know about GitHub?
I had used it for a class one time, and it's basically like you can upload all like your coding projects to it.
Exactly. Yeah. GitHub is kind of the end all be all for coders. I mean, it's the best way to get a job if you want to get into web development. I mean, I think there's much less emphasis when people are hiring for coders on the interview, as opposed to they just like pull up your GitHub account and see what you built. It's an entire community, and it's really cool. And so I want to get you all used to using GitHub so that if you decide to go this route in your career, or even just be adjacent to it, you're aware of that community, and that can help you find coders. If you, let's say you don't want to be the primary coder of an app that you want to build, but you want to find someone who can do that, having a presence on GitHub is extremely valuable for that. And I will now get out of here, and then I will show you my GitHub page. Anyone having any trouble logging on to GitHub or creating their account? Okay. Once you get your account built, does anyone not have their account yet? Raise your hand. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of time, but once you're able to get onto the screen, and don't worry about whether this looks the same, just know that once you're logged in, so that you've got this like profile on the upper right, and this plus sign. Click the plus sign, click New Repository, and then you'll come here. And then I want you to create a repository that is actually the same as your username. So in my case, it would be WRAASCH at github.io. Or no, sorry. .github.io, okay? So if you do this format, your username.github.io, you're able to do something that GitHub calls pages, which is kind of a cool way to get whatever you're coding directly onto a web page without having to do any of the kind of annoying, frankly, server spinning up that and configuring everything. So GitHub just takes care of the configuration for you so that all you have to do is code. Is anyone gotten to this point, or am I like way ahead? Okay, cool. Okay, so choose public, add a README file. And then one cool thing, this is sort of doesn't really matter that much, but you can choose a license. So one of the most popular licenses is the MIT open source license. So it'll configure yourself to have a license so that you know that everyone knows that you own this and you're allowing other people to use it, but you ultimately are the creator of it. Okay, and then create repository. So once you've done that, you're going to add a file, create a new file, and then you have to, let me just make sure that I've got this right. You want to create a file that's called .nojekyll. Don't worry about why you're doing this, but it's sort of to ignore something that can interfere with your ability to create your website. And it's something you have the ability to get rid of if you want to incorporate Jekyll, but I don't want to overwhelm you with all the different programs for now. And then add one more file, create new file. And we're going to call this file index.html. And then write a line of code. So for me, I'm just going to create a header that says, this is Will's page. Close that header. I'm going to do a paragraph that says, putting more info here eventually. Okay. I'm actually going to put this, just because it's best practice, inside of a body tag. I think it'll work even if I don't do that, but I just want to be good. And then that should work. I can also preview this, which just sort of shows me what the code looks like, but it doesn't show me what it's going to actually be. And then I can add a commit. So I can say, rolling out the first code for my web page. And then if I wanted to, I could put, something here, and then I can commit the new file. All right, so now I've got a web page. I don't know if it's going to be ready quite yet. Sometimes it takes a few seconds, but let's see what happens. Yeah, so it's not quite ready yet, but in about a minute or so, my web page is going to be at wrosh@github.io, and yours will be at whatever your page is. Okay, so we'll start with that. I'll send you some announcements throughout this week to give you a little bit more clarity on how to get your team started and to get everyone working on the same code repository. But until then, enjoy your night.
Thank you, Professor.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great presentations, everyone.
Hi, Professor. I have a question.
Yes.
I kind of got lost like grading the repository. I accidentally like entered it without using the README or the license, and now I'm like kind of confused how to like add them.
Gotcha. So there's a couple of ways. You could either go into settings.
Should I share my screen so it'll be easier?
Sure.
Okay. So I was able to make a README file, but I don't know how to. Yeah, like I got lost. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So click on settings. Oh, you know what? You're fine. You have a README.
Yeah, I have a README, but I wasn't able to put like the license, the MIT license,
That's
or
fine.
the other
So
stuff.
I would just create, so add file, create new file, and then create something called .nojekyll.
Like this?
Yeah. And then scroll all the way down. And if you want to sort of say what you're doing, you could write that here. Otherwise, it sort of autofills it. It says create nojekyll. So that's probably fine. And then commit new file. And then add another file. Call this index.html. And then put code there. So whatever code you learned from Codecademy that you want to put in there.
Oh, so this is where the code goes?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. So I don't have to do the codes right now, right?
No.
Okay.
But if you want it to show up, you'll have to put code there. So you can do that, later when you have time.